Let's start by looking at this Patreon viewer request. This was sent to me by one of my Patreon subscribers. I think he said look at the part where it talks about how communism is, it's an economic system. It's a political system that helps out the working man, I guess. This is from a channel called Balkan Odyssey. Has almost 99,000 subscribers on YouTube. Titled, Why I Became a Communist and Why You Should Too.
Blow it out your ass.
Absolutely fucking not. It was put up on October 8th of this year. Already has almost 32,000 views. So let's look at reason number 3. Why you should become a communist, I guess. All right, let's check this out.
Number 3. Marxism is the only means of challenging the status quo and initiating real societal progress.
Yeah, it's going to bring about real societal progress, you guys. Before I get started, I meant to clarify that I think a video like this, what we're about to watch, I think it might be helpful sometimes to look at these videos as instructive rather than thinking about all of the flaws, all of the points that need to be debunked and addressed, and poking holes in the video as I've done many times in the past with all these commie goons and loons and buffoons. Because one of the things about communism, whenever you dig deep into any of these communist countries over the last century and a half, talking about, when I say communist countries, I mean countries where Marxist communists took over and purged their opposition, purged their political opponents, and established a dictatorship, notably the USSR, Communist China, North Korea, Cuba, Vietnam, maybe to a lesser extent Venezuela. See, this is the thing, is like once you dive deep into any of these countries, especially if you look into the living conditions of the masses, of the poor, of the people in these countries, once you start digging deep, it can be a little bit overwhelming. No matter how many books you read or articles you read or lectures you watch from history professors, even recently I got Michael Malice's new book, and he at times talks about some of the horrors that went on in the early days of the Soviet Union. And I have a lot of books on this. I have Anne Applebaum's book, A Red Famine. I have the Gulag Archipelago. I still need to catch up on those. I got some of Stephen Kotkin's books. And whenever you jump into, even just picking one of these countries, especially the Soviet Union and China, and starting to really dig in, starting to sink your teeth into the horrors that the people in these countries had to put up with, the shit that these people had to put up with, and the failures of all of their brilliant economic planning. I'm always learning new stuff whenever I look into this stuff. It's overwhelming. You're always finding new stuff, whether it be Holodomor, whether it be the Great Leap Forward or the Cultural Revolution, the 5-year plan of Stalin, the Great Chinese Famine, the landlord classicide, any of this shit. And it never resulted in prosperity. It never resulted in a significant increase, any increase in the standard of living.
No surprise there.
The information's out there. A lot of these books you can find on Kindle. You can find on probably Apple Books. You can probably find on some bookstore for rather cheap. Plenty of articles written about this for decades. So yeah, communism, socialism in general, it does not increase, it does not raise the living standards for the people it claims to fight for the people it claims to be champions of, especially when you compare them to the freer economies, the mixed economies that are largely free, but far from perfect with their regulatory states and wealth redistribution programs, notably in the United States and Europe. I mean, we saw this during the Cold War with when Germany was split in half, when Korea was split in half. I've talked about this before many times. It's you look at China versus Hong Kong and the U.S. versus Cuba, two inverted situations. In Hong Kong, you had a small island country that was heavily influenced by the English system of law, neighboring a giant behemoth occupied by the Chinese Communist Party. Hong Kong got pretty rich pretty fast. Communist China was in poverty for decades until the Chinese Communist Party decided to lift their boots off the necks of their people a little bit, of the people they were ruling over. Then the United States. You had the big behemoth, United States. Mixed economy, a lot of capitalism. And then you had Cuba, which saw a communist revolution during the 1950s. And it has not worked out so well for the people in Cuba. Anyway, let's get started.
When you think about the list of universally most hated political options by all governments and oppositions alike, you come to the humbling conclusion that there really is no list, and that the singular enemy that incites both fear and hatred among all the world's politicians are communists.
For good reason, too, I would say.
And this is, of course,
I think he's being a little misleading here. I think there are a lot of different ideologies that are reviled by freer countries.
Very good reason. The liberals, conservatives, fascists, monarchists, and free thinkers of the world are all perfectly aware that the only political force that threatens the capitalist order are communists. Sure, they fight amongst each other all the time in parliaments.
Now, did we get that? Why don't we hear that back again?
The liberals, conservatives, communists. And this is, of course, for a very good reason. The liberals, conservatives, fascists, monarchists, and free thinkers.
Free thinkers. It's hard to tell if he's being tongue-in-cheek with that comment or if he legitimately has disdain for free thinkers. Again, this stuff is pretty instructive.
World are all perfectly aware that the only political force that threatens the capitalist order are communists. Sure.
So, yeah, the reason why I think this is instructive, the reason why I think this is telling is because he's lumping in liberals and conservatives and fascists and monarchists and what he considers to be free thinkers. If he genuinely despises free thinkers, that should tell you everything you need to know because like most wannabe dictators and economic planners, they are ultimately at war with reality. They're at war with reason. But I think this is also telling because communists, they hate liberals. And you see this with the way communists, whenever you hear the word neoliberal thrown around as a smear, it's often done by lunatics on the right or tankies on the left. Communists hate liberals as much, if not more, than they hate fascists. And I'm pretty sure they hate capitalists more than fascists as well. They try to, a lot of communist types, a lot of the loons, goons, and buffoons that we see from the left, they like to put up this facade that they're anti-fascist. But they're also anti-liberal. They're anti-capitalist. Might be a healthy reminder to some of the better people on the so-called left, a lot of these liberals, a lot of these moderate liberals who are not exactly in favor of laissez-faire, but they like a lot of capitalism. They want some regulations that they consider to be common sense.
Blow it out your ass.
They want, and in a lot of cases, they think more wealth redistribution is necessary, but overall, they're not socialists. They don't want to end the profit motive. Think about like Bill Maher types. I have a lot of disagreements with Bill Maher, but he's someone that I'd probably consider to be more of a moderate liberal. And I think a lot of better people on the left, they've kind of turned a cheek to the more socialist, crazier types on the left, especially the Bernie Sanders, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez types because, hey, at least, yeah, I don't agree with everything they say, but at least they want nice stuff like free health care. They just want to relieve some student loan debt. And then they don't really pay much attention. As I always say, Stephen Colbert invites AOC onto his dumb show to drink her bath water and kiss her ass. Ugh. Doesn't really bother to ask, hey, can you explain what you're doing with this DSA organization that's pretty explicit about wanting to end the profit motive, wanting to make profits illegal? Big fans of Karl Marx. A lot of people in that organization think communism is a good idea.
Oh, you absolutely suck!
Nice journalism. Well, he's a comedian. He's not a journalist. Okay, whatever. Ugh. Healthy reminder that communists, they're nobody's friends, really. And this should be instructive. You're seeing it from a communist right here. They view liberals with as much disdain as conservatives, monarchists, and fascists.
Or they fight amongst each other all the time in parliaments, elections, and the media. But ultimately, they fight about different approaches to organizing capitalist society. Their differences are aesthetic, surface level, and self-serving, in no way intended to endanger.
I would say when it comes to liberals and conservatives, both mixed, I guess. Although even like liberals and conservatives, I think are kind of getting pushed to the side by the populist elements on the left and the populist elements on the right. But yeah, they're both in favor. I think, especially in America, they're still both pretty big fans of the Constitution and America's founding principles. And a lot of the disagreements, it's nothing like too radical, I guess.
Endanger the fundamental socioeconomic order of class society or improve the lives of working people.
Yeah, improve the lives of working people. You know who's not going to do that is communists.
Of course, the communist alternative is phrased as a threat to Western civilization, to European values, to freedom and democracy, as dangerous authoritarianism and totalitarianism that will destroy everything you know and love. And how can it not be? They know that...
Now, what's interesting here, I might need to replay that again.
Improve the life.
Because I haven't watched this whole video, and I'm not going to go through this guy's catalog. I don't have a lot of time to, like, follow every communist dipshit on the internet. They're not really worth anyone's time. Unless you want to know, like, what they really think. But from what I can tell, he doesn't really debunk the claim he's about to make. This notion that liberals and conservatives, and a lot of people, they see communists as a threat to freedom and democracy.
Lives of working people. Of course, the communist alternative is phrased as a threat to Western civilization, to
threat to Western civilization,
European values,
to European values,
to freedom and democracy.
To freedom and democracy. Yeah, they are.
As dangerous authoritarianism and totalitarianism that will destroy everything you know and love.
Yeah, as they're authoritarians, they're totalitarians that will destroy everything you know and love.
And how can it not be? They know that Marxism is the only tool capable of destroying their class privileges, empowering the working population to rebel against their regime of exploitation, and give us the tools to not only see through their deception and indoctrination, but organizational principles capable of generating immense political power.
See, it's about political power. He's not saying, well, this is a misunderstanding. Because you see this sometimes from socialist and communist types. They say, I don't know if they exactly say that they're in favor of freedom, but they'll say that capitalism is not freedom because they'll say, well, your boss, your employer, it's like a mini dictatorship.
Blow it out your ass.
And I've debunked that claim many a times. Because they think producing for yourself, for your own survival and happiness, that metaphysical need to produce for yourself, for your own survival and happiness, they view that as force, essentially, and they conflate it with slavery. If you're, I don't want to say dependent, but you work for an employer, you produce for an employer to do so, and they say, well, if you didn't have that job, if your employer fired you, you would starve, and therefore they're in a hierarchical position, and that's how they frame this whole master and slave narrative. when it comes to free markets, when it comes to you working for a boss. They see that as no different than feudalism. They see that as no different than slavery, which is just. But like I said, this video, it's pretty instructive. It's pretty instructive that communists, they hate freedom. They hate democracy to the extent that see, that's the thing is I see a lot of communists say, well, we're actually for democracy. We want workplace democracy.
No offense, but it sounds like some fucking commie gobbledygook.
But if we mean democracy, because a lot of people, this is why the term is so muddy, the water is so dirty whenever you talk about democracy. It literally does mean majority rule, mob rule. It's an undesirable ideal. But if we mean democracy as just like having elections to vote in political leaders and vote out political leaders, then that's a good thing. Again, it's kind of hard to tell what he means here, but he definitely hates freedom, appears to hate free thinkers, and thinks of liberals and conservatives as the same as monarchists and fascists. A lot of package dealing going on here.
And boy, are they scared of that potential power. And
yeah, I think it's pretty rational to fear Marxists having political power because they tend to do horrible things with it. And again, you just dive into just pick any one of them. North Korea, Cuba, China, Soviet Union. Pick any one of them, dive into the history, and it's overwhelming. Once you get through the purges and the reigns of terror, I mean, that's just the beginning. And then after you get through that, you still have repression. And on top of that, you just have mass poverty. At best, you just have total economic stagnation, no innovation, no technological developments, long lines at the grocery store, everything sucks. So it's pretty rich, pun intended, pretty rich that communists think that they're going to enrich the so-called workers that they claim to be champions of.
how do I know that? Well, all we need to do is take a look at the insane amount of money and resources spent on annihilating the communist opposition.
Annihilating the communist opposition.
Proof? The entirety of the Cold War and...
Did the United States annihilate communist competition during the Cold War?
Yeah, to the no, yeah, to the no, to the no, no, no.
That's why it was a Cold War, is because, the United States and the Soviet Union, they didn't really get into direct, hot conflicts with one another. A lot of their conflicts were proxies, essentially.
and Red Scare.
I mean, the United States didn't need to annihilate people in communist countries because the communists were already doing a good job of that themselves.
Dozens of military invasions, coups, psyops, death squads, war crimes, purges, and secret operations directed at liquidating hundreds of thousands of progressive men and women.
And notice how he's saying progressive men and women, making, and this is why I refuse to use the word progressive, especially in the context of American politics. I don't think there's anything progressive about communism. And when you look at the rhetoric of so-called progressives dating all the way back to Teddy Roosevelt and Woodrow Wilson, what they're essentially demanding is economic fascism. They think that America's founding documents are outdated. They reject the concept of individual rights. Not much different than Benito Mussolini and the way they think about how society should be organized. But yeah, I think it's pretty telling that he talks about communists as if they are progressive, and they're clearly not.
Were quite obviously a thorn in the eye of the powers that be.
And I think it might be worth noting that the United States government, when it came to foreign policy after World War II, they did a lot of things that I don't like in the name of stopping communism. So I'm not going to sit here and act like U.S. foreign policy was anywhere close to perfect after World War II. I think it's also interesting that he leaves out the fact that before the Cold War, especially during World War II, but even before that, the United States and American businesses helped prop up and develop the Soviet Union. which I think was a huge mistake. But at the same time, to the extent that the CIA was involved in orchestrating coups and overthrowing communist dictatorships, dictatorships don't have rights, so I'm not going to lose much sleep over that. A problem I have with, from what I can tell, about the U.S. using the CIA to orchestrate coups is that oftentimes they replaced communist or nationalist dictators with some other form of dictatorship.
That's just not smart.
And I don't really like that. They usually did it in the name of, just maintaining stability because, Pinochet, the Shah of Iran, they're not good, but at least they're not communist. And that was the whole strategy during the Cold War, was containment, which ended up getting a lot of Americans killed in failed wars, especially Vietnam. And America, replacing, installing dictators in some of these countries, like Pinochet, who, let's be real, was a real monster. Thought it might be worth clarifying that.
B. You don't need any bigger proof of the true nemesis of the established order than the fervor with which they've been condemning, slandering, and annihilating the communist opposition unlike anyone else.
You know who else was known for annihilating communist opposition were communists. I mean, Stalin did it throughout his whole career, not to mention the conflicts between the Bolsheviks and the Mensheviks.
Sure, they do their necessary part of casually condemning Nazis and fascists on a purely moral and metaphysical basis, yet, as Marxist analysis undoubtedly reveals, fascism is an integral part of the capitalist political spectrum.
Yeah, so, fascism, capitalism, basically the same, even though fascists are as anti-capitalist as communists are.
In terms of
Just read any works from the Nazis or from Mussolini. Weren't big fans of capitalism. Weren't big fans of individual rights. When you get right down to it, communists and fascists, they have more in common, much more in common with each other than communist attempts to lump fascists and capitalists in with one another.
a specific purpose which is sometimes bothersome and bad PR, but under certain circumstances, very useful to the capitalist class. If you happen to think that being a conservative nationalist is somehow rebellious and contrarian towards the political establishment or imperialism, just remember that the modus operandi and primary PR material of all of the most regressive pro-establishment lapdogs and compradors is nationalism, the tool for destroying working class solidarity and turning us against each other.
Yeah, this is what I'm talking about. A common theme I notice with a lot of nationalists and communists is often when they're rising to power, when they're taking over countries, they claim to be fighting for the working class, for the forgotten man. They claim to be fighting against the establishment, the elites. You see it today in America with Tucker Karl Marxon types. You see it with how the right is increasingly becoming obsessed with big financial firms like Fidelity and BlackRock, and oh no, Bill Gates is buying a little too much land, and I mean, just the other day I saw Matt Walsh blaming Big Pharma for mass shootings. Not that he considers himself a nationalist, from what I can tell. He considers himself a theocratic fascist. Then again, what's really the difference? And also keep in mind how communist types in America today, whenever they look back at Operation Ajax and how they look up to Mohammad Mossadegh, the nationalist, the Iranian nationalist in the 1950s who rose to power by claiming to fight against imperialism. He hated the British and he was going to nationalize the oil. So yeah, I think it's rather amusing that communist types, they try to act like they're much different than the nationalists. Any differences they have are superficial.
Being a communist is the most patriotic thing you can do for your nation, community, or family, especially if you live in a third world
Probably one of the worst things you can do for your nation. My goodness.
country, suffocated by the burdens of imperialism and colonialism.
Again, looking into any of the histories of communist China, Soviet Union, and then think, oh man, you know what would be a great idea is if we took that governing style and brought it to whatever country you're living in now.
Whether it's Cuba, Vietnam, China, Korea, the Soviet Union,
Yeah, a lot of real winners here.
or Yugoslavia, communists have historically always been the first one in line in patriotic wars against foreign occupation, fascism, neocolonialism.
Oh, in the first in line, especially in World War II, it was the communists. It was the Soviet Union that helped the Nazis start World War II with their non-aggression pact. Hey, let's split up some land. You can have some land over here, I'll have some land over here, and we just won't fight each other. And then the Nazis started World War II with the Soviet Union sitting on the sidelines. And then once the Soviet Union got involved because Hitler stabbed Stalin in the back, then Stalin and the Soviet Union were they needed help. They needed material help from the United States. So yeah, it's pretty pathetic that communists today look back at World War II and act like they were the real winners of World War II. If anything, they enabled the Nazis and would not have been able to fight them without help from the United States.